Connection Point family, and whoever else is listening to these online. It's one more of our first fives today. And so today I just want to talk just a little bit about the idea of Sabbath rest. The idea that we just want to rest in God's presence, the idea that we just find hope in that space. And when we live in that space, we find that life, there's a better rhythm to it. I wore a shirt today because I'm a big Notre Dame fan. And I'm hoping we're going to watch college football this fall. And I'll probably be on a couch a lot of Saturday afternoons watching Notre Dame play. And so they have this kind of phrase on their wall as they walk out. It says, play like a champion today. And here's the reality. One of the ways in which we play like champions as followers of Jesus is by doing nothing. And that sounds crazy. You're like, why would you tell us to work really hard and to play like a champion today when yet at the same time you're saying, just stop. Stop what you're doing. See, in the Old Testament, we see in the beginning of creation, it says for 6 days God worked, on the seventh day he rested. And then you go see the Ten Commandments, it says honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. And then you see Jesus come, and you see in Mark chapter 2, he says something that just kind of changes everything. He says that the Son of Man is Lord of even the Sabbath. And he heals people on those days. He does what's called work. But he changes his work because that work is different. It flows from the Father's heart, from his love, from the nature of who he actually is. And so here's what I want to say to us today. Well, the reason we need to rest, the reason we need to slow down, the reason we can't play like a champion every day in that kind of way is because if we don't find time in silence or solitude and resting in the presence of God, then we don't know how to respond in moments when we speak. And so I actually think Paul gives us some good words from Colossians chapter 4, verse 5 and 6, when he says these words, conduct yourselves wisely toward outsiders, making the most of the time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer everyone. Did you catch those lines? Conduct yourselves wisely toward outsiders, making the most of the time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer everyone. You know, we're in the middle of this pandemic right now, and there's literally been a run on toilet paper. And before I make any more jokes about people taking all the toilet paper, I want to say this. The reason people have taken all the toilet paper is because they're living in fear. That's the reality. It's afraid that there's a scarcity out there. It's a fear that there's just not going to be enough for all of us. And so they'll make sure they take care of themselves and whoever's in their house, and everybody else can just figure it out themselves. But here's the reality for us. If we're not careful, those kind of behaviors, those kind of practices, what we post on social media when it's partisan politics and it paints one side as evil and one side as good, doesn't matter which side you're on, every single time we do that, we reveal the reality that we have not spent enough time resting in Sabbath presence with God. We haven't spent enough time in solitude. We miss Paul's words here where he says this, let your speech or your social media post always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer everyone. So the question for those who call ourselves followers of Jesus is simple. Are we living in such a way that it's evident by our lives? Because if we buy into the idea that the discipline has to be this work hard every day, all day long, and we don't slow down, then we're not living into the rhythm that God has for us. And so maybe during this pandemic, maybe you and I can make sure we change some rhythms in our life. Some that are really fast, we slow them way down. And we find in that we begin to live and rest in the presence of God, and then our words are gracious, abounding in love. And the reason Paul clarifies insiders and outsiders here isn't because Paul doesn't want everyone to know Jesus. He clarifies the difference because there should be a distinction by how the followers of Jesus live. Let's live in such a way, if we call Jesus Lord, that is evident by our life and our words and our actions. May you reflect on that this day in God's grace and peace and love.